That's fine. No worries. I hope we are audible everywhere. Okay, awesome. Good afternoon. Lovely to see everyone here. Litfests have been in the news for all the wrong reasons, so it's really lovely to see everyone here. Um, as you know, we are here to discuss Love, Sex, and India, the Agents of Ishq Anthology, edited by Paromita Vohra. I've been a big fan of Paromita's work for many years, of her films, her writing, but most importantly, of the utterly distinctive way of looking at Indian life that Paromita has, with both tenderness as well as a sharp eye. And I've been a big fan of her voice for many years. When she founded Agents of Ishq, she created something very rare, which is a space where Indians could speak about sex, love, desire, without shame and without imported frameworks. And for more than a decade, I feel people have been sending in their stories, which are messy, honest, heartbreaking, and hilarious in equal measure. And the new anthology gathers the best of them, right? And it's a book that refuses to be prescriptive or preachy, and it trusts us enough to handle complexity, which is what I really loved about it. So I'm so glad to be in conversation here today. Paramita, let's begin by talking about Agents of Ishq. And you've spent so many years creating a space for people to talk about love and other demons. And love is a thread that exists in all your work, whether it's film, whether it's your own writing, whether it's the work that you do with Agents of Ishq. Why do you love love? Why is it worth all the trouble?
I mean, I think when the word love, it's usually kind of looked at as a topic, which is to do with romantic relationships. And of course, I think that's a very big part of love. But I think of love in a slightly more expanded way, uh, as something which asks of us a kind of contemporaneity, by which I mean that the capacity to look at something and value it irrespective of what the world tells you is valuable or not valuable. So to that extent, I guess it's a political thing, but I always hesitate to say love is political because now that too has gotten a fixed meaning, right? But in the way that politics is really born from living, from continuously doing something that may or may not have been done before, that is not mandated. So in some ways, love is a kind of hacker, right? It hacks the algorithms of life, which tell you that you should be this way or you should like this. And I think for me, in that way, love is like one of the three um, lenses or prisms through which I've understood my own life and tried to understand the world, the other two being art and feminism. And I think they all do the same work in some senses, right? And I also think that there is within what people do inside love. And in that, I mean love for their friends, love for the people in their lives, love for the world, which I really, really believe in. Uh, they do something poetic. And it's very important that in a world increasingly prosaic, you need to celebrate the poetic in yourself and the poetic in the other person. Right? To be able to see people in a poetic way is actually deeply inclusive and is to recognize the themness of them, so to speak. No? So I think for that reason, I find love an infinitely, as infinite as a rose, continuously showing you so many new ways of looking at the world. And I don't know, like, even in terms of being in love, a very favorite pastime of mine. And every time I think, like, now I'm getting old and I'm definitely going to get over that behavior. But I don't. I mean, even being in love with someone or something is just to become new again. And it's just suddenly to believe that things are possible again. And this is a remarkable thing, right? And it's a thing to be held on to deeply and celebrated at all times. So, yeah.
That was so lovely. Is about how a young woman reflects on her mother having to leave her friendships
Yeah.
behind, and it spins out in all of these different ways. Can you tell us a little bit about the selection of the essays and how they kind of span this range from confessional to expressionistic to some of them have this force that I felt that if the writer didn't get the story out, they would kind of almost burst. And some of them are, very carefully sifting through memory. Some of them are memorializing. So tell us a little bit about the selection of some of these essays
So do you mean the section of the essays within Agents of Ishq or within the
within the
anthology?
anthology.
So, I mean, I think I'll just step back a bit to say how the essays ended up being on Agents of Ishq at all, which is that when Agents of Ishq began, I think, it was in the years when online publishing and platforms were seeming to be a fertile space and we can all do something new, and we could all do something new, actually. I don't want to pretend that it was all bad because things are so bad now, right? But I guess we imagined that, or I imagined that it would be a place where we would make things. I mean, I'm a filmmaker and I wanted to experiment with doing an art project on social media and the internet and see what I could do there. So it was very much imagined as this kind of, no, I won't say sexuality education project per se, but a kind of space to talk about sexuality in multiple registers as well as do some sexuality education. But imagine education as being something to do with thinking about queerness, thinking about histories of desire, and so on and so forth. But of course, it was a very particularly crafted voice, right? That it was very friendly. The language was very everyday colloquial language and full of like masti. That there would be a kind of atmosphere of fun and pleasure and affection and exuberance, because that's not the atmosphere in which you normally see sex. I mean, you only see sex in that way in Hindi movie songs, which already had been sanitized out of Hindi movies by liberals who felt that, this rational, songless film is a better thing than having this kind of running around trees. And frankly, I never understood that, but that's a different discussion. So when we created Agents of Ishq, actually, uh, it was a surprise to us, a beautiful surprise, that people started writing saying, I too want to be an agent of Ishq, and that each of them interpreted that completely differently. Like for somebody, it was like, I want to make drawings, or I have a poem I want to share. And very soon, these personal stories began trickling in, and we were not actually geared to, like, we didn't imagine this would happen. So we didn't really have that editorial staff, or and we didn't have that much money, so we just went with it, like, okay, we'll do it. And in the doing of it, also the interesting thing that happened is, so in the first essays that came to Agents of Ishq, actually, because it was in a completely open landscape, there was not yet an existing language of how to talk about sexuality online the way it is today. So things were quite like, one of the first pieces was about a young woman who's Muslim, very believing, wants to have an arranged marriage, like she wants to live within that tradition, but she's passionately involved with reading romantic novels, especially for the dirty bits. And then she talks about her entire journey of first the Mills and Boons, then the more like Silhouette Desire, then, that whole thing and the eroticism of it, and then becoming so curious about her body and about masturbation, then thinking, I'm going to get a Brazilian wax to see what it feels like. And it was like a kind of crazy, unfettered journey with the self. And then she says, now I know you're thinking that when I get married, what if it is to somebody who cannot fulfill this full sexualness that I have created in myself? But I'm not that worried, because I think I'll be able to tell anybody what I want now. And I'm like, this is amazing. Like, how is this person writing this thing? So in 2014 and 15, to get these stories which you had never read outside before was extremely thrilling. And I think what was amazing is that people knew that somehow this is a place in which I can tell this story. The story doesn't fit or it doesn't belong in a category, but it's my personal exploration of my life and my wisdom from living. So that is actually how the repertoire of stories on Agents of Ishq began to grow, because then we would edit them, illustrate them, put them out. We began translating them into Hindi. And then every time you put out one story, you would get another six, but not on the same topic. It was always, the topic was only people's intimate journeys and their explorations, but it's not like, oh, I'm queer, so I'm sending my story here. The other thing was, yes, people who were sending stories were queer and straight and older and younger and all kinds of people. So this was really a beautiful outcome in a way. In terms of choosing what stories came in and didn't come in, I think like we had a very simple frame. The stories should really speak rooted in experience. There should be some arc of discovery. It should not be like a little lecture that this is what it means to be have a good sexuality kind of thing. That they shouldn't fall into binaries. And initially, it was not that hard. Sometimes when people would send in a story, and a favorite example of mine is a young man who wrote a story in very kadak English and sent it. And the first line of the story was, I joined Grinder and everybody knows Grinder is for losers. And then, I kept looking at this and thinking, like, what to do. First of all, this English is so strange and, Ren and Martin feeling. And so I just wrote a few questions in and sent it back to him. And I rewrote the first line as, I joined Grinder and felt like a loser. Because I was like, I think we shouldn't speak for others somehow. When he sent the rewrite back, it was like a different person had written it. It was suddenly so vulnerable, suddenly so young, suddenly so regular, So I think we also evolved the editorial guidelines of how people should speak for themselves, but not for others. And we did have a policy that we don't take cultural opinion, we don't take that kind of like little manifesto that this is how you should be. I discovered that I don't care if I'm fat, but anyway, I'm beautiful. So they were not declarative, they were exploratory stories. And we had one other editorial guideline that we did not allow the use of the word problematic on Agents of Ishq. And you still won't find it there. So, yeah, that was how. But for the book, I think the stories that were chosen, some of them which cohered very much to this personal, complex narrative, didn't fall into easy binaries, the trauma versus liberation, or whatever other tropes that have come to be regular in how we speak about sexuality today. And also that sometimes stories work really well in context. They are online, they are on a website about sexuality, and there are people who are reading them in continuation with many other things. But here, the stories had to stand on their own, like they had to be experiential in a slightly different way. So I think that was really how the stories were selected. But most of all, I think just the stories that I feel that I responded to strongly, it was that personal, that I loved this story, I loved editing it or loved working on it, and I loved the kind of responses it generated from readers. Yeah.
And the wonderful thing is that it doesn't matter whether it's a story about a young girl taking a dip in the pond, or somebody who's older and looking at younger men for companionship. Everybody has there's a spot of wisdom in every single story that I've read in the anthology. So that's the wonderful part of it, right? That everybody has
Yes.
something wise and something unique to them to bring to the anthology. Let's talk a little bit about the personal essay. And Agents of Ishq came into being during a time when the personal essay was really kind of having a moment during the mid 2010s. But now the kind of world that we occupy now is, in the social media era where everybody has the terms and everybody knows therapy speak, and even I find like increasingly even the raw unfiltered bits that I see, even those feel curated. So where does Love, Sex and India, the anthology, and Agents of Ishq actually, where does that sit right now?
I mean, I think that it's certainly true that it's very difficult today to, when we say internet, we're always meaning social media, and I think it's important to remember that social media is not the whole internet, but it dominates our consciousness, and that it's very speedy in categorizing things and encouraging you to categorize your experience before you even had it. Like, I am this type of person before you have become a person, right? So it's not really encouraging you to think about what kind of person you are, but continuously it creates the checkbox, like a checklist in which you have to find yourself and then only follow that or whatever. So it's really, you have to make a political commitment to not being boxed in that way. And I would say that, Agents of Ishq, one of the first positions we took, one of the first learnings we had was that, of course, we were told that, if you put a little bit of money into promoting stories, then you'll get more traction. So we started doing that, and it was quite exciting to suddenly see the likes racking up and believe that everybody loved your content so much. And then one time we published an essay that was quite dense. It was a writer was like, it was not a personal essay, it was an essay about something else, but the writer was not willing to make the language more lucid, and after a lot of struggle I was like, chalo, Let's make a nice drawing and see what happens. And then it had 7,500 likes. And I was like, no, ye puri dal kali hai. Like this is not can't be. So then I opened up the likes to see, and then there was a thing like there were all these bot like, but they were not yet bots. There were also many people who were being paid to do these things, like just randomly like stuff. And that time I took a call like, we're not going to do this. Like we are just going to make ourselves vulnerable to failure or small numbers or whatever to really understand what is happening. And I think that was good because today, over time, we developed a totally different way of engaging with the audience. And we measure our impact in very different ways than people who use analytics. So I think that that's co-creative element of Agents of Ishq, where you're actually engaging with the audience, you're asking them questions, where you're deep reading the comments to see what are people really feeling. Like I remember that we did some kind of Instagram sticky question about what are you scared to ask for in love? And there were so many vulnerable responses to that. And one of the things that emerged from it was how much people craved touch, but how fearful they have become of the idea of touch. So we did a whole series on touch. We did a whole series on the idea of vulnerability. So actually, it became a very, very different kind of dance with the audience. So I think in some ways, Agents of Ishq is like an oasis in the internet. It totally resists the logic of social media. And that means that you're not going to get the 1 million followers, but it's really pretty okay. And it's probably good because the 1 million followers tells you that there isn't something very specially personal here. And I think Agents of Ishq wants to make a space for the specially personal. Yeah.
On that note, would you like to read an extract from the book?
Yes. I also want to say that, one of the writers is here, Srinidhi, whose essay, Secret Diary of an Indian Sex Educator, is in the book. But yeah, maybe we will ask her to read a little bit later. Yeah. So I'm going to read an extract from an essay called by Devasmita Das, which is called My Struggle Was with Being Sexual, Not Homosexual. More than an identity, my struggle was with being sexual. When I went to college, I was starting to know who I was. Although, if I have to phrase it more honestly, I was starting to get better at explaining what I identified as. I started coming out to people and found solace in making queer art that further cemented me in people's eyes as that queer person. My work really was my refuge. While I was falling in love with close friends who were straight, roommates, beautiful seniors, basically everyone, the emotional hoe that I was, I tried to find answers through my work. When I was confused about why I sucked at understanding romance or approaching it, I analyzed my queerness to death and made an animation that explained how heterosexuals had unlimited media to guide them in their love life, but us queers had nothing to teach us. When I was heartbroken and no politics could explain it, I would draw and dump it on my Instagram. I'm still mentioned in some articles as a queer Insta artist. I call myself gay Rupi Kaur in private. My personal would always be political, so I took advantage of it and made a portfolio out of it. I was building a reputation as that queer person, as that queer artist. Among my friends, I was that relentlessly gay friend. In truth, just as a person, I had no clue how to navigate my love and sex life. I had placed all my value in making my identity useful, in changing the world, in articulating a politics, and I always prioritized it over, or perhaps even interchanged it with, my actual personal life. I was out and proud, but inside I found myself unexpectedly stumbling upon shame more and more. That shame, though, was not about being queer. The better half of every it gets better narrative starts with coming out. I had already done that. I already knew that liking, loving, desiring women was okay, but my personal life still felt deeply sad. Whenever I fell for someone, the impossibility of it all would fall like a great weight on me. I was afraid of falling in love because every time the person was either straight or not interested in me, I taught myself to confess my feelings, but only did it when I was already in too deep. I didn't know how to flirt or test the waters with someone because I was at a stage where just the prospect of befriending a queer person itself would freak me out, forget expressing romantic or sexual interest in them. In college, we were surrounded by romancing and sex and hormones, but I felt completely in the dark about how sexual interactions happened, let alone know how to engage in them myself. I may have discovered myself straight away in identity politics, and I am truly glad I skipped the oh shit, I'm an abomination, this isn't normal phase. But my identity as a queer person soon became a bit of a shield to protect myself from the turbulence that comes with one's private life in the world of love, in the world of sex. I didn't take my steps into these worlds because it got easy to foreground my queerness and ignore the fact that I wanted love and sex as a person, not for the sake of ideology. And somewhere it was easy to ignore it because I have, in many ways, been taught to think of relationships and sex as an indulgent and unimportant part of life. It was easier to say I was queer and think it was socially and politically relevant than to say I was queer and I wanted to know more people like me to befriend or date. Even when I tried to create a safe space in college, my first fear was what if people think I'm doing this just to find people to date? To be seen as wanting love and pleasure at the most basic human level. That's an emotional shame no one seemed to be talking about. Even the most woke of people around me would never be caught dead admitting to actively looking for intimacy. To admit to being lonely was to let down the cause.
This is such a nice extract because it goes straight into the next question that I wanted to ask you, which is about what is the meaning of storytelling for oneself when you're writing through all this shame and confusion and just sort of floundering of in this sort of landscape. What does that act of naming an emotion or understanding yourself do, even before anybody else reads it? What does it do for the writer?
I mean, I think in one sense, it's a commonplace thing to say that, to be able to confess your own feelings to yourself is the opposite of being lonely. Like, if you are alienated from yourself, then you are, of course, deeply lonely. So I think that's the first thing. Uh, it is a therapeutic experience for many people, I think, but it's different for everybody. I don't want to say it just means one thing for everyone. There are some people, like people who wrote into Agents Fish, some of them are born writers, like they're amazing writers. We never change more than 4 words in their whole piece. Some who just could not write and who could not even articulate what they wanted to say. And it would take a very long time of going back and forth before it became clear. But I think, for some people, there was almost like people have written to us at the end of the editorial process and said, after I finished writing the story, I just went to my dad and said, I'm gay. Or there was a woman who wrote a piece, fantastic piece actually, about moving in with her boss partly because she didn't know how to say no. Like this peculiar relationship where you are kind of in love, getting some comfort, but not really wanting it, but are not able to assert yourself. And then in the process of writing, first she wrote about it, but then as we were editing over that couple of months, she got some guts to move out when he was not in town, but at least she moved out because she wanted to do that. Yeah. So I think like for some people, those journeys happened as a process of, in the process of writing, they let go of some fears or that feeling of isolation, and it is an amazing thing to discover that storytelling can do that for somebody. For someone else, I think it is just it's a joyful experience, like just to tell a story or talk about something you felt. I mean, there's a wonderful piece in the book called I Took a Nude Selfie, It Changed My Life, by somebody. I mean, she's really a great writer. She has written for us more than once, and I think like just to she felt like she was more herself when she was doing it. And I think in making documentary films, the one thing that I feel every human being feels is, I'll say it in Hindi, कि दुनिया ने देखा नहीं मैं क्या चीज हूँ. People really feel that people haven't understood what I am, and I'm going to be what I am. And I think there's a certain swag in that. It's an emotional swag, right? And I think that's what it does really to tell your story. Yeah.
I also wanted to bring you in on this question about how a lot of the essays they rail against norms about sex and desire, and for instance, Diary of an Indian Sex Educator. It's about someone who has to impart sex education without using the word sex. And another one about disability and sexuality. The writer says something very profound about how heteronormative norms actually disable everyone, not just, I mean, they affect disabled people the most, but actually everybody is kind of hamstrung by the norms that we have to sort of live by. How do you undo something so structural? And do you see Agents of Ishq playing that role, in dismantling these norms?
Yeah, I mean, at a very, I mean, I don't like to say it, but I guess at a very much larger level, Agents of Ishq, I mean, I'm interested in creating a kind of space of uh, s- both tremendous fun. I mean, I think having fun together is the core of like change. Because when you have a lot of fun, like when you make a new friend and you have a lot of fun together, you start veering off the path. Like pleasure, you're always told not to indulge in too much pleasure because it will mislead you. But actually, it leads you, right? It leads you to the place you want to go. So I think uh, there is a desire in Agents of Ishq to put pleasure at the center of how people connect with each other and connect with themselves. And I think that that does change the world. I believe that, yes. So, in a sense, it is aiming to make some structural changes. And at a very core level, when we started Agents of Ishq, one of the things we did very mindfully, though we never said it, was we did not, we put women and queer people at the center. We didn't actually take much interest in straight men. And straight men continue to be most straight jacketed, so to speak, of all, and still find it difficult to engage with the world of love and sex. We don't get that many contributions. Like the straight men are in the comments telling other people, you should be like this, you should write about this thing, well done, but like by who made you the principal of the internet, I don't know, but so
Can't get rid of those
yeah,
guys.
but by keeping that, like making the center women and queer people, we were able to kind of co-create these a very different syllabus of sexuality, so to speak. Like the contours of the discourse were completely different on Agents of Ishq, and that really for others who wanted to enter, they have to do it on the terms of that space in that way. So I think that does make a structural shift. I think Agents of Ishq has had a huge impact. Like I think it created a language to talk about sexuality in a very desi way, and I think we have been copied to death. So and sometimes that pisses me off, and then I have to be like, well, it's a good thing, I suppose. But as an artist, you always feel that little bit like, "Arey, apna kyun nahi banate ho tum apni tarike se," type of thing. But anyway, so I think. Yes, in that way, by offering a language, you do provide the means to make a structural shift. I think the internet promotes binaries a lot. We know that promotes political binaries, personal binaries, and you have to always be straight or queer, this or that. So to have a place where you're not this or that, but this and that, I think it's a very important political act. So yeah, I think have I answered your
I
question or
think you
just
have, but I have another question about,
yeah,
about
yeah.
placing women at the center,
Yes.
because one of the themes in the anthology is encounters women can't forget, the section.
Sex actually. Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
and you touch upon the fact that too much heterosexual sex is inherently non-consensual. Can you dwell a little more on that, and how do you make sense of experiences that are not that may not necessarily be violent, but are not enthusiastically, chosen?
So I think like one of the things is people like to talk about sexuality. They do not like to talk about sex. So everybody is like very liberal in theory, but the moment you start talking about sex, they start becoming very like and little uncomfortable and just like, okay, see you in a bit. They move away from you. And it's considered to be somehow lesser. To talk about sex itself is lesser on the scale of politics, on the scale of art, on the scale of feminism, all of that. So I think, but I think what Me Too did in a way, and a lot of the discussion on Me Too got, I think, repurposed into things that dissipated its power. But one of the things that emerged with Me Too is uh, countless personal narratives, granular narratives about sex actually. because people were writing about things that did not necessarily fall into the category of sexual harassment, but just what happens inside heterosexual sex. And that is when you read and you think like, almost everybody is having non-consensual sex. Like, it may not be a violation in the way that we understand rape and harassment, but within sexuality there is so much coercion, there is so much unhappiness and unpleasantness, and it's supposedly consensual and chosen, or well, at least there's some volition involved, but there is so much ignoring of the other involved in these stories. So I think when the Aziz Ansari story broke, I feel that was the clearest, right? Because people were like, oh, it's just bad sex. And what is bad sex? Like, who is it bad for? Is really the question in there. And why is it bad, right? So I think quickly the conversation started to, one, just veer away from how women were experiencing things to other people deciding the meaning of women's experiences. So we partnered with the Ladies' Finger to invite women to write about their most memorable, like the sexual memory you can't forget, good, bad, or indifferent. Because we also wanted to like disperse the conversation and say that it's not that every sexual experience can be slotted into violence, but rather one has to see sex from the point of view of women to reimagine what sex can be. And sometimes women don't, like, there have been people who have written articles for us about understanding retrospectively that what had happened to them was a kind of rape, but that they didn't necessarily want to go to court, or like that was not the thing that they wanted, that they were looking for something else. So everybody also has a different notion of justice in some ways, right? But I think what's interesting about the stories that came in sex actually were like, there's a story like boring sex rocks. Like this person who had a boring one night stand, but was like, it was chill, it was cool, everything was okay, so no problem, you know. And there's a beautiful story also about a woman in a horrible marriage who one night hooks up with somebody and it's great, and it just gives her the thing that I don't need to be all the time suffering, and she just leaves. So you have those kind of stories. Then you have other stories where people, there's a story about the onion breath, and the onion breath was great. I had eaten onions and she had eaten onions, and you know, and I'm thinking, so I was just thinking like, actually people relate to their own sex lives in such numerous ways, and this is infinitely, I mean, it's infinitely interesting because there's a lot of kinds of people out there in the world, and women are never supposed to tell stories in that way. You know, everything has to be fit, it has to be serving another cause, the cause of nation building or the cause of maintaining the family. I love outside my identity for the good of the liberal nation, or for the, you know, upholding of the conservative nation, whatever. But like, actually somebody is upholding onion breath. I mean, amazing. Like, the Republic of Love is a very very interesting place in that sense. So I think, yeah, that away from the idea also of consent, that the conversation on consent, which is yes means yes and no means no. I mean, Agents of Ishq has always had an interest in this vast maybe space, right? Because in recognizing the presence of sexual violence and non-consensuality, a lot of women's agency over their own experiences is taken away from them. My right to decide what this non-consensuality means and how I want it addressed. Like, quickly it becomes like the justice system will decide for you. You will no longer decide the meaning of your experience. So I think that's really why the Sex Actually series was done. And I mean, I think, yeah, it was powerful. We got 100 people writing in their stories anonymously, and yeah, so there's just about 10 in the book, but yeah.
Right. You've touched upon this just now, but I do want to push you a little further on this liberal squeamishness about sex. You know, how so many liberals will talk about progressiveness and, you know, will talk about, they have the language, they, you know, lofty conversations about consent or bodily autonomy. But actually, when it comes to talking and writing about sex, there is immediately like a pulling back. Where do you think that comes
Pulling
from?
out, maybe. Yeah. Yes.
Missed
Sorry for my bad
opportunity.
jokes, but yeah.
That was a missed opportunity for me.
I was
But
feeling like I'm becoming too serious, and yes.
yeah, but where does this come from? You know, is this anxiety linked to class? Is it, you know, is it some sort of primal, inescapable shame, or is it something else entirely?
I mean, I guess it's all of those things, like we know that so much of sexual squeamishness is about the fear of losing control over a narrative of caste superiority. It's about sanitizing things, etc., etc. But I think at heart, with liberals, I mean, liberals, when you speak about sex as it actually happens, you just become a person, right? Like you're not suddenly fit to rule. And the effort of many people who take on a certain political identity is that they are continuously proving, I am fit to rule. So, but now when you start talking about what you are like in sex, then you are just a person, and I think that's very hard for people to be. I don't think the world makes it very easy to be just a person. Liberals, of course, they really are puzzlingly committed to rationality. They very much believe that if you tell people the right information, they will all become uplifted and reformed. So this great reformist zeal of the liberal results in a real disconnection between the body and the mind. As if to say the mind is outside the body. I mean, that's everything is in the body. So this dichotomy that is created, I think, yeah, there is. It's really that there is a discomfort with talking about those things. I think emotions are one of the most under discussed things in most liberal discourse. There's a lot of discomfort. I mean, look, I'm a documentary filmmaker. It doesn't get more liberal than that. Like that is like most pathetic liberal choice you can make as a creator, right? To be a documentary filmmaker. And I know that for me, I mean, touchwood, I've been lucky. I've had a lot of love for my work, but there's always this kind of a liberal propriety that work doesn't serve. And so I'm always like, oh, young people love your work. Yeah, Paro's very, she puts on the fun stuff, so it makes it palatable to others. So there's a kind of non-seriousness with which people will see you because it's very difficult. It's very democratic. Pleasure is a very democratic thing, and it's a very vulnerable thing because when you make something in order to give pleasure and to be with people, you put yourself on the same plane, and as in love, you open yourself up to rejection. And I think liberals are not good with rejection. I mean, we can see that. So,
And I think one of the best examples of this is in that essay about this girl who loves taking Instagram selfies, and how she's repeatedly told by liberal men,
yeah.
academic, smart young men, that, oh, actually you're not. You're not doing it right, and man after man after man is telling her that, maybe you
Insta
should
spam
not put
queen.
your,
Yeah.
you should not put yourself out there, and
Yeah. Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
it's not worthy.
Yeah.
Would you like to read another extract, or should
I
we?
don't know.
Because I have just like one last question before we dive into with questions with the audience. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think it would be nice to get some questions, and then if people don't want to ask questions, I can read an extract to fill the time.
Okay. Wonderful. We can go into questions then.
I mean, I hope everybody's buying the book.
Any
That is my
questions
question.
yet?
Hello. Hello, ma'am. My name is Ambika. So, my question, as we are talking about sex in a very independent way, I want to ask, I want to get it in a really very vulnerable way out. So, when we speak about sex and about women, for men and for women, sex is really different. Women, it's connected to a lot of emotions. Men, it's a lot of physical. And also we have a book out there why women want sex, women want emotions, love, and men want sex. So when we get the whole thing about sex, it is said that whenever somebody kisses a woman, a lip kiss, a French kiss. So you automatically we get a feeling, we feel good. But when we speak about pleasure, and we for men it comes through sex, but for women it's through orgasm. And lot of women, most of women do not speak about that. We just be like,
What is your question?
my question goes here is, what do you think that women, why do women can't really speak about orgasm when it, like how they feel, because orgasm is basic. that is what makes women, it makes them feel good. Pleasure comes through orgasm for a woman, and it's not through sex. Sex can be like, okay, it will be just for a minute, but they won't really feel that intense. It won't be really, it won't give pleasure. But orgasm is the one. But not all women, and most of the women do not talk about this. So
I
what do you
haven't
think?
exactly understood your question because I mean
Yeah.
orgasms are part of sex and pleasure is also part of sex. Like when you say we feel good when we kiss, I mean that's pleasure and it's a part of sex, right? Whether the kiss will lead to orgasm really depends on the kiss and the person's kissing, right? And how long they've waited. So I think, I just think like, I think it's true that there has been historically a discomfort for women to speak about sexual desire. Although we have like, you know, we are, so one other thing that I want to get 10 rupees for every time somebody has asked me the question, in the land of the Kama Sutra. Why? I'm like, if anybody else asks me, I think I'll just like change my topic to, I don't know, like statistics. But the thing is that uh, people are always talking about how there are many texts, ancient texts, where female desire is celebrated, etc., etc. I mean, I think that's fine. That was back then. So we live in the now, and I think that it's not as if men also talk about sexual pleasure all that much. There's a kind of false idea we have that men talk about sexual pleasure and women don't. You have many accounts from women, and there are, you know, personal columns in magazines have existed forever and ever, where people are writing about their many questions of love, sex, and desire, and in many languages, and women are asking about it. So I would say, insofar as people talk about sex, women have also done so. Men too are kind of taught to talk about sex only in one way, like, oh, I'm always ready for sex, and oh, you know, I can keep going for so. Like there are some indices through which men are supposed to talk about sex. That's not really necessarily pleasure. So in some ways, I think men need to talk about sex more in a more truthful way, for everybody to be able to have more pleasure, right? And I think that this idea, when you're speaking about emotion, women feel emotion. Actually, you didn't really refer to emotions. You're saying that the degree to which women want to engage with pleasure and slowness or difference in sexuality is more than is allowed in the mainstream discussion about sex, because the mainstream discussion about sex is based on a stereotypical male experience that sex is supposed to be like this. But in fact, that's not how it is in life, and that is why talking about lived experience really helps us to know that there are many ways we can enjoy ourselves. I hope that answers your question. Yeah.
Hi. So the
It was on.
I had just finished translating Sangeet Bari, and I had attended one Lavani program when you were sitting next to me.
Oh.
And I'm from a very conservative home where we do not really explicitly talk about the topics that you have. So I was told that she has this
My parents weren't
website.
exactly encouraging me either, but
Okay. So I was told that, okay, she has this, Bhushan told me that there is this website called Agents of Ishq, not the kind of thing I would Google. But out of curiosity, I did. And what I found really remarkable was the prose. It was precise. The words were chosen very carefully, very aptly. The clauses, the phrases, everything appealed to me.
Thank you.
I read it for the language.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to hear that.
I really did like that. And
Thank
then
you.
I read, I don't know if it's a column that you did or the occasional articles that you wrote in Midday or
Yeah,
Mumbai Mirror.
it was a weekly column. Yeah.
Yeah, which I found that, okay, this is a studied subject. This is not superficial. So I read more. And that is why yesterday when I read your name, I said, I have to meet her. And may I
Thank you.
invite you tomorrow for Appetite, because the launch of the book Appetite, because I was told that that story is very bold.
Oh, really?
So I would like you to
Yeah.
be there.
I'll be
Thank
gone,
you.
but I'll get the book. Yeah. So,
Yeah,
yeah,
okay.
yeah.
So, but yes, I do like the language that
Thank you.
is written. All of these essays, I don't know if you edit and rewrite all of them,
No.
but I must say, Very, very well written.
Thank you so much. I mean, it's a kind of collective also, right? The people writing in, and there have been many editors who've worked at Agents of Ishq. So, sorry.
What's your process? Somebody sends you an article
Hmm.
and then you make it like uniform?
No, no. We work very hard not to make it uniform. Like it's our position that we should, it should be clear to understand for others. It should communicate what it's really trying to say. That it should be readable and fun, but it should not lose the writer's voice. So sometimes people write in very inflected English, right? Their English is filtered through another language, and we don't try to change that into like proper English or anything like that. And we retain a lot of the words from their own languages that people have in the pieces. So I think that makes it also more like lived and yeah, interesting. Interesting. The writing becomes interesting because of that. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you.
So I had a question from, in the land of the Kama Sutra, uh, when you were writing, create a website called Agents of Ishq, were you ever concerned that it would make you sort of put you on a pulpit as sort of this expert on this and thereby actually have a negative effect on your own ishq life and your sense, number one? And two is now that there I'm curious what the Instagram algorithm makes of Agents of Ishq, as in what kinds of ads does it think people on Agents of Ishq should be reading?
My goodness, I haven't. That question is, I haven't. I don't know the answer to it, the ads question. But now you made me think that I should go and see. But I think also see like different people run the Instagram account, so they may also be liking other things, and I'm sure that lots of like sex toy ads and all of that must be coming. But I think that algorithm depends also on your phone and everything else you're doing. So maybe it's not an accurate accurate assessment. But I think that's this problem of having to be a spokesperson for an idea. I mean, I hate that idea. I don't wish to be a spokesperson for anything. And then sometimes people really ask you the questions where you are supposed to know the answer to everything. So, I mean, it probably has a dominoes effect on my ishq life because I'm like, I don't really know the answer to that. And I'm like, not impressive in being that way. But I think it's very tempting because the idea of the influencer, it's very evangelical idea that you should preach. You should tell people what to think. And like the influencer, yeah, it really is a very biblical kind of methodology of the influencer. So I hate it and I have tried to stay away from it. It is the route to success. It's very much rewarded, so it's hard. But on the matter of like what does working on a website about sex, love, and desire do to your own love life, I would agree that it has a bad effect because it's like what they say about people who cook all the time don't feel like eating. So yeah. Yeah. Like it becomes too normal actually. Some of the mystique that powers, I mean, you until you fall in love. If you don't fall in love, once you fall in love, then all bets are off. But if you're not in love at a particular time, it's become so much like aloo pyaz for you. Like people who walk into our office are like, what are these people? I mean, Debasmita, one of my colleagues, was telling a story the other day about how we did this series on masturbation tips. And then, like the three women who were working at AOI, they were like looking up the internet and, oh, there's a tip to give men on how to masturbate. तो कैसे करते होंगे? And then they are like trying to figure out the movements, and so like it's become so technical and routine at times that yeah. Yes.
Hi, what a
Hi.
lovely session. So, my name is Shehnab. I live and work in war zones of Syria and Lebanon. So, my question is actually part commentary and part question. So, in course of my work, we have a northern Syrian city called Aleppo. So, I stumbled upon something so fascinating about female pleasure because the Sunni clerics at a point had declared the female orgasm haram. Okay, and I'm a Muslim myself, I've never heard of something like this. So when they declared it haram, there was a social contract amongst the people of Aleppo where a hetero married couple, the woman can have a lesbian relationship which is sanctioned, all right? But again, male control patriarchy, most of the times the men could also select the girl for the, and it's very fascinating when they walk into marriages, because marriages in Syria are segregated in terms of the audience. So the male would go to the male side, the female would go to the female side, and then she can carry her girlfriend with her, the wife. There, fascinating, fascinating. And then juxtaposed to this, another brush I had with female pleasure in that side of the world and in conflict zones. I have a colleague who's Palestinian, and the father told me once, "How come you don't have a child? We are like 21 siblings." And then when they saw the expression of shock on my face, it's like, "Habibti, why are you so shocked?" Because my grandmother had 35. And immediately, yeah, and immediately my response was, "That's a cow, that's not a woman." you know? And then, so then he said, "No, but that's national duty, because who else is going to fight the Zionists? We have to have 35 children and you have none. This is horrible, Habibti." So you see, like, I encountered something so fascinating about female pleasure and the control of it in this side of the world. Now, having said this, my question to you is how I stumbled upon these very fascinating aspects of sexuality, the queerness, which is almost like a national duty. Have you, in course of your work, encountered these very beautifully bizarre, fascinating things that you have carried with you and has manifested in your writing? So that's my question.
Yeah, I mean, I think not in the personal essays. Actually, the personal essays have rarely been. I mean, there's a great essay called "Prostitute and a Savior," written by a trans person who, for some time, worked as a sex worker, and she talks about how it made her feel better about her body, and then she got involved with this older Bengali gent who wanted to reform and uplift her, and how for a while it was a. So, I mean, I found it a more uncommon essay in that the relationships were not those we normally hear about. Not so much in Agents of Ishq, but in other work I've done, especially a new film I made in which I spoke to many sex workers. I think you see very unusual relationships outside of what is ever discussed. Because the moment you go into worlds that are outside marriage and which are autonomous in some ways, you do see really tremendous mix and match of relationships. But nothing that I can particularly recount. I mean, I think it's very interesting what you're saying, that something is sanctioned, it is pleasurable, but it is controlled, and and I think that's true. That's true of so many things we see. But I would say that this idea of having many children to serve the nation, the idea of control of reproduction and population is, of course, not limited only to areas of conflict, but also the nation state. I mean, India's whole history of reproductive control is staggering. To the like the whole family planning thing. When you read accounts like letters to the editor from those times, you are finding middle class elites saying that, "Oh my God, poor people have too many children, and they are letting down the new nation. We are not a really great modern nation because poor people are having too many children and letting us down. So therefore, we must control the population." So the kind of assent for population control, really, it rests on one or two people who came up with these theories and then put them, and you have like forced, what do you call it, sterilizations during the emergency. So we've had a history of all that here in a much different way. And I think, yes, of course, in a typical sense, the control of women's sexuality or queer sexuality is a desire to preserve marriage at the heart of everything, and to have that heteronormativity be the way that the world runs, and it preserves caste identity, class identity, keeps the idea of sex for pleasure is, it is not sex for marriage and reproduction, actually. So that is why it is highly discouraged as a topic. Yes.
Hi, ma'am. My name is Elsa. It's a pleasure to meet you and really wonderful session.
Thank you.
So my question to you is, your book contains essays, right? Personal essays of people's experiences with sex and love. And you have also had people send their experiences to you in your website as well. So is there any particular incident or experience of someone that you relate to, that, oh, this has happened in my life also, quite a predicament, like, this has happened in my life also? So if there's an experience like that, if you're open to sharing, if you can share that. And second question is, do you think Gen Z is more open towards love and sex? And what would be one advice that you would give them? Because it's mostly hookup culture and online dating. You never know what the other person means when they just text you,
Yeah.
what's up, hey, like you genuinely don't know.
But nobody
So,
knows, right? Like the history of love is endless conversations with your friend about like what did he mean when he said this. So, but he just said hi and full stop. Why did he put the full stop, right? So that's analyzing texts to death. It's an age-old occupation for lovers. So I think it's not very special. I mean, I relate to multiple experiences in the book in different ways. And I think that's what's amazing about experiential writing, that it allows you to connect even if you've not had the identical experience. Is Gen Z more open to love and sex? I don't think so. I think they're more closed actually, because the thing is that the fear of being wrong is a lot. The desire to be in control is a lot. And the desire to succeed is a lot, and the fear of hurt is tremendous. But you just can't, like, love, sex, intimacy, hurt. They're all like a package deal. It's going to happen. You're going to be rejected. You're going to fail. You're going to act like an ass. You're going to be embarrassed till you're 70 years old about something you said when you were 20. That's not going to change. But I think like the willingness to enter that very messy, unpredictable world, it's very low, the appetite for that in Gen
so
Z
you would
people.
ask
So.
them to get into relationships more often?
I would
you
ask them. I would ask them to take a few more risks in allowing themselves to be loved, in allowing themselves to be loved, and also in loving others. Yes, and when I say loving others, I just don't only mean romantic relationships. I mean like people you see around you, being vulnerable, saying that you want to hang out with somebody, and uh, and risk hearing no should be done, because after one or two times you also realize it's not that bad. Like it hurts for a minute and then it's okay. So I think, yeah, really, you got to make more friends, you got to hug more people, and you got to take more risks. No other way to live.
Super session. You want one more? Okay, one more. This is never ending. It's just going on.
And I can have no advice for anybody, so don't ask me to give any advice. Yeah.
Thank you for that wonderful session. And I wanted to actually ask about this safety net of anonymity, which I'm sure that many would like to exercise that, right? But how do you all, as a platform, negotiate in that space? Because you might know who the person is, and then
Yeah.
how do people also move ahead from that anonymity?
On Agents of Ishq, our policy is we don't insist that people have to use their real name. They are free to be anonymous. We don't use anonymous. We say you can choose your own name. So you can make up a pseudonym or you can write it in your own name. I'm continuing. This is the most shocking thing, the number of people who want to do it in their own name. Like there was one person, I was like, I beg you, don't write this in your real name. I'm begging you, don't use your real name. Because at some point you really feel like, I'm going to say this and I don't care. But we are one of the most important things that we spend all our energy on is we want to protect the writer from the way that the internet turns your story into clickbait, from that violence of the gaze. So we spend a lot of time editing the stories to allow for that to happen. And, sometimes like, people think they want to tell the story and put it out in the world, but the moment when the story is out in the world is always a shocking moment. And some people do feel exposed and vulnerable in a way they hadn't anticipated when they send the story. So I think it's important to provide as many protective layers as you can. It's not about, see, the internet pushes you to give your raw experiences for clickbait. So how do you prevent that from happening is the question. But yeah, like I said, when we brought the book out, like, we wrote to everybody and asked some people who had written under pseudonyms that, do you want the pseudonym or your real name? What would you like? Everybody was like, I want it in my real name. I'm like, Inko kya ho gaya? How come suddenly now they want it? So I mean, yeah, people negotiate. I think like once they have written the story, it's been out there, and then horrible things have not happened. Sometimes they are comfortable to claim the story. Yeah, yeah.
Excellent. So thank you so much for this absolutely wonderful and
Thank you.
engaging
Thank you.
session. And thank you, Paromita, for holding space to discuss love, Ishq, and all the various, angles that come with
Thank
it,
you.
and in a safe space that we are allowed to speak about all of this.
Thank you very
So
much.
much,
Yeah.
and thank you, Karanjeet.
Yes,
for
thank you
this
very much,
interaction.
Karanjeet. Thank you, the festival, for having me.
Thank you,
Please buy
everyone.
some books available
Yeah,
at
the
Dog
book
Ears
is
Bookshop.
yeah, the book is available right outside. So